You have written down your points. We're going to figure out how to succeed with self-scoring proposals today. Let's dive right in. If you answered on those questions, if you answered 3 yes, you can give yourself 5 points. If you answered 2 yes, you can give yourself 3 points. If you answered 1 yes, you can give yourself 2 points. And if you answered none of them as a yes, you can give yourself 0 points. So is there anybody, you can raise your hand in the chat or whatever if you've gotten 0 points? Nice. Okay. Anybody who got 2 points? Okay. 3 points? 5 points?
All in one day. That's impressive.
I was gonna say, I'm that surprised at all of you people eating other people's lunches. Okay, so that's kind of just a brief introduction on kind of how self-scoring proposals may look when you experience them. But really, we'll talk about kind of what the government thinks self-scoring proposals look like. We'll start with our introductions, tell you a little bit about Trident and about ourselves, and then move into what actually is a self-scoring proposal. If you've never heard of it, or if you have heard of it, we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what they are. We'll give you some tips to succeed in self-scoring proposals and finish up with what you can do now to prepare for them as they come out. We want to take advantage of lulls in your schedule. And so if you have a lull, maybe focusing your business on self-scoring proposals and getting prepared for that is a good idea. So we want to give you the tips to be able to do that now so that you're not super stressed later. We've got cool banners at the bottom of each of our slides, so keep an eye out for those. We try to pull out some hot tips there for you. And feel free to ask questions via chat throughout the process. I think the Q&A is open, so you can use that as well. So let's get into it. If it lets me turn the slide. Here we go. I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca, for our introductions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So a little bit about Trident. If you are new to us, if you haven't worked with us before, if you found us by mistake, doesn't matter. We're happy to have you. We like to say that our mission and values are really what set us apart. So we are a team of capture and proposal professionals who basically integrate into your teams on a project-by-project basis. We can also do longer-term duration support, but we come in and help government contractors basically identify, position for, and win government contracts with our professional staff who provide high-quality service. And one of the really unique things about Trident is that we are committed to creating flexible and portable job opportunities, particularly for drilling reservists, military veterans, and military spouses of active duty service members all over the world. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the next slide. But if you've ever worked with us, you will probably have heard us talk about our core values. These are military level professionalism, teamwork, client-centric excellence, owning the outcome, and thriving. And so again, if we ever have the privilege of supporting you, this is what we try to bring to the table in terms of our service, our personality, just how we approach and problem solve alongside you. So next slide, please. And a little bit more about the business specifically. So we've been around since 2008, although the members of our team have experience in government contracting that dates before that. We are a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, and we're headquartered, as much as any company is these days, as a remote company in Southern California, and we have a globally dispersed team. Again, remember those military spouses and veterans. We're all scattered. I'm in Hawaii. Kylie is in Virginia right now. Morgan's on. She's in North Carolina. But if you check back with us in 6 months, we might have different answers to those questions. So we really try to use that to our advantage, though, because what we found with proposals is that if your team is spread across the globe, you can really expand the proposal preparation calendar and take advantage of everybody's working hours in the different time zones. So we like to, thank goodness we have teamwork as one of our core values, because we can start a project on the East Coast, pass it off to the West Coast. It'll take a little trip to the islands out here in Hawaii, then end up on the East Coast back at the beginning of the day. So again, as I mentioned, we do provide full business development lifecycle support. So this is everything from opportunity intelligence, business intelligence, looking at the market, looking at the competitive research, the capture management, right? Once you find the opportunity that you think you want to bid on, you can come talk to us. We'll help you position for that, engage with the client, shape the opportunity so that you've got that competitive advantage. And then when things move into the proposal phase, You can call us if you need a writer, if you need a manager, if you need a tech editor, if you just need somebody to vent to, we can come in and support your team with that. And then if you're between opportunities, we always like to remind people we do have training services as well. So if you've got a junior team, or if you're expanding into a new market and trying to get familiar with the way an agency does certain things, that's a great time to give Trident a call, because we can help your team prepare when they're not in crunch time about what to expect, what their roles are, and really how to execute things efficiently, so that when you're in the throes of a proposal, you're not also trying to learn your job for that, right? So you're not building the plane as you fly it. You're doing a little bit of prep work ahead of time to make the whole process of the response smoother. And then we do also offer executive and presentation coaching. So if you find yourself having to respond to a proposal that has orals on it, or a video presentation, or any sort of scenario where you have to actually go in and talk to the government face to face or via video screen about how your team is going to solve the problem or address the requirement, give us a call. We've got some fantastic orals coaches on our team who've got proven processes to get your team ready to feel confident and prepared in the presentation. And we take a flexible and scalable approach to supporting both small and large federal contractors. So I do see a lot of familiar names in the presenter, or sorry, in the well, I do see familiar names on the presenter list. I do know everybody presenting today, but I also see familiar names on the attendees. So great to see some returning clients here today, and just excited to tell you about these self-scoring proposals. So Kiley, what's our next? Oh yes, and then your lovely hosts here. So Kiley is fantastic. She's been with the team for about 6 years and has moved a bunch of different places while you've been with Trident. I think when you started working for us, you were in Japan. Yeah, so bounced around a few times. But she's one of our capture and proposal managers. She's on the GWAC execution team. She's a USNA grad. Really fantastic. If you're a new client, you've probably talked to Kiley. She's one of our friendlier faces, so we love to have her do sales. So yeah, hopefully, if you have not talked to her, she's a great person to meet first at Trident. And then I'm Rebecca Wayland. I share a lot of characteristics with Kiley, although she's definitely the friendlier one. But I am Trident's GWAC lead, the chief of staff at Trident. I've been with Trident about 10 years. I'm co-author of Fast Prop. So if you have any questions about ways that you can implement a proposal process more efficiently at your company, I'm your gal. And again, Navy grad, Navy spouse. Oh, see, she's got it. Thank you for the plug, Kiley. But yeah, so Navy grad, Navy veteran. We're both Navy spouses. We're both SWOs, so we love checklists, which is one of the reasons that we were both really excited to present on the scorecard opportunities. In particular, there's a lot of things about these particular acquisition strategies that just are so well suited to our personalities. So we jump into it. Okay, so oh, sorry.
Well, I'll take it over for you. What is awesome. A self-scoring proposal? The definition of one is just that it's a simplified acquisition process that helps you evaluate your own submission primarily through the scorecard or through a point-based system. It began in OASIS way back when the government decided that they wanted to award to multiple companies, and they were concerned about overloading their team. So they were concerned they would get a lot of offers and have to process through that data really fast. So it moved away government proposals from the lowest price technically acceptable and trade-offs in favor of awarding the contracts to offers of varying core expertise in a variety of professional services disciplines. So what does that actually mean? Basically, they wanted to be able to award contracts not just at a cost-effective way, but in a way that emphasized the quality of performance and the capability of the offerers. And so the scorecard gave them a way to become subjective in an objective way. They could rack and stack the quality and the performance and the capabilities against the very objective scorecard. So when they originally came out, this is I think a great quote to kind of give you an idea of where this originated from and what their intentions were, that given the breadth and depth of OASIS small business, a more objective approach rather than a subjective approach will be used for the basis of awards, focusing primarily on the non-price factors. And so when we, sorry about that. Yeah, okay. So when we go to a scorecard, technology, We typically have a couple of different characteristics of that scorecard. We've often seen multiple phases of the evaluation. So whether that's through initially having gate criteria, which would eliminate you from the next stage of competition, whether that's requiring certain systems or certifications to even submit an offer. They usually have past performance thresholds that an offer is required to meet. So you have to have performed in something similar in scope and complexity and size that the government contractor office is interested in supporting now with this new contract. And then we'll give you, obviously, the scorecard part of it. And then finally, the price evaluation, because while they are trying to move towards away from just looking for the lowest cost offer, they also do consider that your price does matter. So they do look at price evaluation. When we talk about strict compliance when it comes to scorecard proposals or self-scoring proposals, we're talking really about a binary evaluation of the stuff that you're submitting. So it has to be evidence-based. It has to be backed up by the proof of your CPARs or proof of your contract experience. And so all contracts, we can say, require compliance. You have to be compliant to submit any sort of federal contract. But when we're looking at scorecards and things like that, you also have to have the evidentiary support for what you're claiming. And so when we're looking there, the compliance is really binary. Did you pass this or do you not have this? Do you have the certification or not? Do you have this experience in this field or not? And that really helps you kind of like down select through your projects and move through your scorecard and evaluate it in a way that's totally objective rather than that subjectivity we see in some of the other contracts. There are typically smaller narrative requirements. We've seen that kind of shift around with maps recently, but the narrative requirements become smaller just because, again, we're trying to move away from that subjectivity. And there are often clear intentions on awardee numbers. So the contracting office will release, we intend to award exactly to 150 people. We intend to award exactly to 76 people. And this can kind of give you a great idea of how you will fit within that scheme of all of the offers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but how your scorecard may measure up against other scorecards. So why would they do this? First, we'll talk about things that we have seen that are self-assessment scorecards. So I'll let you talk about this, Rebecca.
Sure. Yeah, so this is a lovely slide with a lot of logos because you can't have a multiple award IDIQ without having a custom logo, right? So probably you recognize some of these names, and I would go one step further and say some of these you probably recognize as success cases, and there are probably a few making you cringe, especially if you submitted bids for things like Polaris or CIO-SP4, Department of State Evolve. Not every execution goes as smoothly as what we would hope with these acquisitions. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why, because even though, as Kiley said, they do have very binary compliance evaluation spectrums, they can be really complicated. And when we get into our things that you need to do to prep, it'll make a little bit more sense about why some of these have struggled so much in terms of getting off the ground and awarded and into execution mode. So next slide, please.
Yeah, so the nice thing about that last slide is that there are so many logos on it. And so now we're starting to get into some scorecards and some self-scoring proposals that may be more successful than some of their predecessors. And it really kind of helps us understand why the government would pursue this. Typically, they are improved efficiency. So when it first started out with OASIS, that's what they were aiming for. They expected a lot of offerers, and they had a really small office. So they want to be able to move through that evaluation process faster and process a large number of proposals in a very short amount of time. They wanted to also improve their objectivity, like we talked about. So that really is helpful for us in industry because it means that there are less opportunities for protest. Now, we have seen with a lot of self-scoring proposals recently that may be not necessarily the case because of some of the way that they describe those evaluation criteria. But the idea is that we are looking for less opportunities for protest because we have more objective evaluation criteria against the scorecard. That's why we see pass or fail requirements there too. The goal was also clearer communication, that they will clearly release their requirements and sort through only the companies that have those requirements. So again, this helps efficiency, this helps objectivity, and they all kind of feed onto each other. Finally, the resource reduction, but it's resource reduction on both sides. So for the government, there are fewer evaluators necessary, but for your own team, there may also be fewer evaluators necessary or fewer proposal developers necessary, because the load may look a little bit different based on how you're building out your proposal because of how the scorecard works. So if you have a nice bank of projects, which we'll talk about later, these scorecard proposals may start to become a lot easier than some of the larger 60-page technical response proposals that we see in other contracts. One of the ways that they do this resource reduction is via Symphony, which is a joy to work with. This is a little icon of Symphony. So if you've seen this, I'm very sorry for the flare in your PTSD, but we want to just point out that Symphony is a good indicator of your score, but that it's not infallible. You are inputting all of your stuff into Symphony. You are categorizing all of your points and your scores within that program. And so sometimes you can kind of trick it. You can make assumptions that maybe the government doesn't make. And so while you can see your score in Symphony, and that's very helpful in helping you evaluate it and see if you're going to be a good candidate for that proposal, it can be fallible. And so that's one of the reasons why later on we're going to recommend a secondary party evaluator. But Symphony is one of those things that the government uses to help reduce resources. And as we see more self-scoring proposals integrate into that Symphony system, it's going to only get easier, hopefully, for you and for your team, because you'll just be able to pull the past performance projects that you've already built into the system. All of your documentation is there, and you can apply them to a new project. In theory, we'll see how this actually works.
There is a caveat to this, right?
Yeah.
And that is that Symphony is probably going away. So the general sentiment, though, is applicable to whatever the platform is that the government is using. It's going to have some function that aggregates your score, but it's only aggregating your score as you input it. So there's a little bit of built-in bias, and it is subject to misrepresentation, not intentionally, but again, the system is only as smart as the information that you're giving it to display. So yes, we'll see. Right now, Symphony's on the chopping block, which actually I now that I've used the system probably for four submissions, it's great, right? But no matter what they pick next, we're gonna get smart on it. We'll be around to help. And maybe Symphony will get a stay of execution. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Maybe it'll be orchestra instead.
Yeah, it'll be orchestra next time.
Yes. Speaking of the limitations of Symphony, take it away.
Yeah. So there are some pitfalls with the scorecard evaluations, right? As much as we love a checklist and love the binariness of it, and then just knowing, right, having confidence in your bid because you know what your grade or what your approximate grade is going to be. It is tricky because there are some technological limitations for these large scale evaluations. You know, as Kiley mentioned, we know generally with the multiple award IDIQs or the GWACs what the target number of awardees is, and sometimes the target number is as many as qualify, right? So if you can pass a threshold score, you're going to get all those people. Well, that means you're going to get thousands of bids. You know, I feel some sympathy for NASA right now evaluating all of the SOUP evaluations, which were not scorecard, but with the expansion of that GWAC, right, they're just going to have to sort through thousands and thousands of bids, and we see this with these multiple award agency-wide contracts. A lot of people want to get in on them, so it can be tricky to figure out a platform that can process all of that. And then it also introduces you've kind of got two levels of understanding now that you have to go through. One is the actual solicitation requirements, and the other one is the grading platform, the grading and submission platform, to make sure that you're reflecting things correctly. It can be really tough to anticipate some of the loopholes and gaps in the contract or in the solicitation requirements as written. If you were part of Oasis Plus, we had one timeline that they published at the start of that, and then it kept getting extended and then paused and then resumed, and then it got submitted and then it got amended again. So there are things that change in government contracting, in the acquisition regulations, just in what the intent of the contract is to do that can drive changes, or that expose loopholes that, maybe the contracting office wasn't tracking, because people didn't know it till they saw it, right? They didn't realize that they had something that fell just outside the black and white regulations. And so then they've got to take some time to figure out how to address that fairly, and make sure that they're not disadvantaging or that they're not putting small businesses or other businesses at a disadvantage. That's a better way to say that. And then, the other kind of pitfall of these larger scorecard evaluations is that if you are a company that does not have a lot of qualifying experience on your own, meaning if you're not already outperforming this work, you're probably going to see a lower score, because we've seen anywhere from 50 to 80% of the points on a scorecard be derived directly from relevant experience projects. So whether that's the relevant experience side of things or the past performance side of things, there's always, I would say in the ones that we've evaluated in the last, or participated in the last 5 years, the lion's share points come from existing experience. So if you're a business that's just starting out, the good news is you're going to know if you qualify or not, or how competitive you are right at the beginning. The bad news is you may not be able to go at this alone, and you might have to look at some teaming options in order to be able to actually get your foot in the door on these contracts. And then we still see issues. I mean, it's still a solicitation, right? It still comes from this office and gets interpreted by this group of individuals. So there's always a little bit of a learning curve as we go through the evaluation terms, the solicitation requirements, to try and figure out exactly what they're asking for, because as we all know, words do matter. And when you see something, on the page, I think actually I'm going to go back to Kiley's question at the beginning, right? If you accidentally eat somebody's lunch, that's not the same thing as intentionally eating somebody's lunch, right? So you don't get to apply your own interpretation to things. But again, and we've seen this trend too, there's going to be a lot of questions about the solicitation, and the government may not clarify every single one, or they may say in answering your question that you try to ask, they might just refer you back to that solicitation paragraph and say it's just proposed in accordance with the solicitation. Well, okay, but if I don't understand it and you're not clarifying it, what does that mean? So that does come up on these bids, and I will just say it can be really helpful to have a neutral third party looking at your material and advising you based on what's happened historically to try to fill in those gaps, and create that common understanding, because they can be a little bit tricky. Yeah, so what can you do? How can you actually be successful in a scorecard bid? I think, Kiley, you're going to give them the secret sauce. There you go.
Yeah. Or try to. So we have 4 tips for you to succeed in a government scorecard. First, you're going to try to get involved early, but carefully, cautiously. Second, we hope that you understand the ask. 3, that strict compliance we talked about before. And 4, the root of all government contracting is to have quality performance and healthy relationships. So what does that mean?
So in terms of getting involved early, but proceeding cautiously, right? Take a look at the draft solicitations. What are the certifications that they're going to have as required or as the highest, point collectors? Take a look at your past performance portfolio. What projects do you have that will qualify? Sometimes you can use an IDIQ. Sometimes it has to be a task order. Sometimes you can use an OTA. Sometimes those don't count as projects. So really kind of getting your arms around what's out there in terms of your own portfolio is a great starting point. And then think through your capture structure, like who's going to go to the industry days, who's going to be your SME, who's going to be the person that has stayed plugged into this as we go through thousands of questions and multiple amendments and maybe an extension or 2 in there. What's your point of continuity going to be? Because these are really difficult opportunities to groundhog on, right? Like if you pop in and pop out and pop in and pop out, you're going to miss something. And that can be fatal in a scorecard evaluation because of that binary criteria. And then we always like to get people started by just organizing their projects. Like, what was the contract number? What was the IDIQ number? What are the periods of performance? What was your total value? What's your executed value? What's the NICS code assigned? What are the project qualities, so that you at least, again, have everything aggregated and kind of cataloged in one place. You don't have to apply it yet, but at least you know what you're dealing with, so that when you start getting firmer guidance or when you start getting finalized criteria, you can start doing a more informed lineup of what can go where and how it can qualify. And then understanding those performance requirements. This one is really important, and it's a step a lot of people skip. We're not talking about the performance requirements of the solicitation. We're talking about when this thing turns into a contract, what is going to be required of you as a bidder? Like, everybody and their brother wanted to bid on NASA Soup. Did they need to? I don't know. Same thing with Oasis Plus. That one's really appealing because it's a scorecard, and maybe you have the performance, and maybe as long as you're over the threshold, you're going to get that contract. But if your company is not set up to deal with multiple federal agencies, or if you're not going to be able to meet the participation requirements on the contract and interface with the PMO, the government's contracting office, as often as you're supposed to, or bid on the number of task orders that you're supposed to, or win the number of task orders that you're supposed to, it might be so hard to fight that temptation to just throw in a bid just for the sake of bidding. If it's not going to be a contract that you can use, you really need to take a time out before you invest a lot of time and resources, because spoiler, it's going to be a lot of time and resources in order to get just at the IDIQ award. And then, yeah, we have our little pro tip over here. We've never seen one of these. Solicitations come out and stay static, right? You can plan for an amendment. You can't necessarily plan for an extension, but you can plan for something to change. There's going to be something that changes between the draft and the final, between the final and Amendment 1 or Amendment 18 in some cases. So just we'll reemphasize this later, but you cannot just assume that because you did some prep work, that is not going to be set in stone. So we'll talk about that more when we have our what not to do list.
Part of what we've been hinting at is understanding the ask, and that's pretty hard sometimes with the way that some of the evaluation criteria are written. We aim for all of our clients to make that bid or no bid decision as quickly as possible. That saves you time, which means it saves you money. If you understand the requirements that exclude you from participating in something, then you can just wipe your hands of it and be done with it. And so one of the other sides of that, though, is that if you can identify the things that exclude you, you may be able to position yourself to participate in some of these larger IDIQs in the future. So you may be able to fill gaps that make it possible for you to bid later on, whether that's through teaming, whether that's through pursuing your ISO certs that you didn't have, whether that's through getting a facility clearance or something like that. So by understanding those requirements and understanding what the government is asking for and understanding what they're asking for repeatedly, you can kind of anticipate what you're going to need to have in order to bid on things like this in the future. Part of that is understanding the evaluation criteria. And we've seen in a couple of different versions of this, I've got a great Oasis Plus one, that the way that the government defines something that they're evaluating and the clarity that we're looking for don't always align. And just like Rebecca said, you can ask 100 questions and the government may never clarify. So one of those things that we saw with Oasis Plus was this definition of specialized functional experience and how you kind of scoped that out in the contracts you did have. And that was pretty much it. So like if we said that something happened to fit within one of those specialized functional experiences, you had to prove that it did. And so how you proved that you did became the question for your submission. And so kind of understanding the nuance of how to prove that in a binary way so that you don't lose points on the back end when the government is actually evaluating them. We've seen MAPS and Alliant 3 begin to move away from that narrative portion of the evaluation, but it's still there. It's still part of it. And then also the other example that we have on here is Alliant 3. So Alliant 3 came out and the government said, we intend to make 76 awards. In order to be considered for this, you must score amongst the highest 76 rated offers received. And so if you're looking at their scorecard and you have I mean, I know it off the top of my head that it's 89,000 and some change points, but say you have 100 points available on a scorecard, and the government says we're only going to award to the top 76 companies on this 100-point scale. If you have 52 points on that scorecard, this may not be the right opportunity for you, and you may be wasting your time. And so understanding how the government is going to evaluate and then award can affect that bid or no bid decision and how you decide to proceed with your company or not. So Line 3 is a good example of that. If you are not very competitive in that particular expertise field or that particular NICS code, then maybe that's not the right opportunity for your team. Maybe that's not the right opportunity for your team right now, and it may be in the future.
That's actually a really good point, Kylie. The right now, in air quotes, because with these larger contracts, especially that are long run, there can be some good prep work that you do in kind of getting your head around the past performance and the portfolio that you have. Because very rarely are these a one and done. There's almost always an on-ramp. The criteria is usually similar, not identical, but you can get a good gauge of, you know what, this isn't the right time for us to go after this. But what we're going to work on between now and 3 years from now when they do an on-ramp is getting this kind of contract or getting this facility clearance or getting, this sort of teaming relationship so that we can add this capability. So that's a really good, that's the other unspoken benefit of doing your homework and making that informed bid, no bid decision kind of early so that you can figure out what you need to do to be more healthy if it's not the right time.
Right. One of the things that we've kind of hit on this entire time is this compliance, this idea of compliance. And so if you're new to government contracting, first, welcome. Scorecards are a crazy way to start, but here we are. Compliance is your ability to answer exactly what the government is asking. And in scorecards, that's binary and evidence-based. And so these are some examples from Oasis Plus where we had to actually mark up our documentation to provide that binary evidentiary support. So whenever we're coming into a scorecard, this requires meticulous documentation. If you've had some sort of amendment onto your contract, or if you've had some sort of change order, those things may factor into how that project is evaluated. And if you fail to provide that documentation, you may lose those points. So we always encourage you to be your own worst enemy and to be harsh as you're looking through your collected documents. And when you can't do that because you're so used to what you're seeing and you're so comfortable with what you're seeing, we very much recommend bringing in that secondary evaluator. Our blog has a great blog for you to read about how secondary evaluators can make a huge difference on your proposal. And in scorecards, this is a very, very useful tool in your toolbox. Having somebody come in that's not used to your projects, look through your submission and grade it can make a huge difference on catching the things that you may generally overlook. And a scorecard is easy enough that you can really kind of go line by line, just like you would for a compliance check, and evaluate your projects against that scorecard and get a score. And so having that secondary evaluator, whether it's us, because that's a service that we offer, or somebody on your team that's not working on this, is really going to make the difference in making sure that all of your ducks are in a row for how you've submitted this proposal and how you've developed it.
So real quick, this is I think our fourth thing that we want to emphasize around how to prepare, and this quality, performance, and healthy relationships. So we talked about how the lion's share points come from project-based experience, whether that's being able to demonstrate that you have the technical capabilities, or as we often see on these scorecard bids, that's the relevant experience side. But then there's a past performance element that really speaks to, okay, you had some qualifying work, but how well did you execute it? Are you a contractor that we would want to hire based on your management abilities, based on your cost control, your schedule? All of those things get evaluated in CPARs. So we always like to encourage people to think about experience on two fields. One is, does the technical capability match, and did the project qualify in terms of alignment to what the same sort of scope and services are going to be on the upcoming contract? And then how well did you do that work? So that's where that quality performance comes in. So just thinking through, what are your high scoring contracts? Because you might have a contract that aligned with every single technical area that is being represented on the new contract, or maybe it was, very easy for project documentation because the period of performance was clear and the value was clear, and the NICS code was the NICS code assigned, and so you don't have to do any sort of narrative to get it realigned to a different category. But maybe your CPARs were just satisfactory. That might not be the best project to use, but again, it's important to know these things at the outset so that you're tracking, like, all right, where does the strength of the project actually lie, and how does it complement the whole portfolio that I'm submitting and presenting to the government? And the way to get the quality performance is to do a good job, right? But also to have this relationship with your clients where they're willing to vouch for you and they understand what's being asked of them. The point that I want to emphasize here is that a lot of these scorecard bids will have some form of a project verification form that goes in, right? So you're going to have to either submit some project documentation, or you're going to have to get a signature from your client, your government client, a commercial client if it's permitted, but a signature from them saying, yes, everything this offer is claiming is true. That is the work they did. This is the schedule we were on. They had these skills. They performed it well. They're going to have to attest to you claiming this project for credit. And sometimes that is the only attestation that the government will take. Sometimes you don't get to submit things on your own behalf or a written narrative that explains why it should count. It's really as binary as, does the contracting officer agree with what you're claiming? And so it's really important to have these conversations ahead of need so that they know if you're planning to use a project, or at least entertaining possibly using a project, they know to be prepared, and you guys can have conversations, not to game the system, but just so that they understand what the criteria happen to be for the contract. This was something that we spent a lot of time coaching our clients on Oasis Plus on, was having the conversation so that the government client felt comfortable signing the form and understood on their side what they were signing and attesting to. So there was a little bit of education involved from the actual contract performer to the contracting agency or the representative, because it's not their contract. They're not the ones that set it up, and people will not sign something if they don't understand what's being asked of them, and that, as they shouldn't, right? So it's just important to understand what you did, what you need from them, and we just encourage those early conversations so that no one's surprised and saying, well, wait, why do I have to be involved in your Oasis Plus bid or in your Polaris bid or in your Alliant 3 bid? I don't have any part of that. Like, I don't care what you do on that contract. Like, well, it's a little more complicated than that. So, okay. Yeah. Now what? Or what now? Great question.
So we're going to cover kind of how to prepare for those upcoming self-scoring proposals. And our very first recommendation is to get involved now. Read about the opportunities that are upcoming. I'll give you a great place to go to check that out later. See what gaps you have in your scorecard so that you can fix it before the next RFP is released or before that on-ramp period opens. You can fix those things and become competitive. Look at the things that are common across all of those IDIQs or all of those self-scoring proposals. And then finish your CMMC certifications. It's not right now that it's required, but it is coming. So that is something that you'll need to do as well. One of the other things that we have seen in industry days of all places is that small business offices want to connect with you, and these contracting offices want to connect with you in meaningful ways. And so we do recommend that before you're interested in pursuing some of these things, before the RFP is released, because once it is, they can't really talk to you. Touching base with these contracting offices, understanding what their needs are and understanding what they want. Get in touch with the small business administration liaison offices within each of these contracting offices. Look for potential industry teammates and establish those relationships early. Think about if there's an opportunity for you to get experience with those teammates so that you can kind of build up some of that organizational risk assessment. Register on their vendor lists so that they're aware of your company. And a lot of them have recommended setting up a time with them, the small business administration offices particularly, setting up a time with them where you can really kind of sell your business and pitch your business to them. because then your name comes up more often. And so they're starting to see you, and they may connect you with other opportunities besides the self-scoring things. But building those relationships will help you kind of get a clue on how they're going to form their self-scoring proposals, how they're going to form all of their contracts, and what their priorities are, which can help make a more compelling bid when you're submitting.
And then just one more thought on that, Kylie, the draft RFPs that get issued, they often ask for feedback. So sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a Google form, but definitely read through those and think through, okay, if this was the final, right? If this is what the guidance was, is it putting my company at a disadvantage? And it might just be worth bringing up some sensitive things, right? Like there are a couple, I would say, hot topics every time, right? Joint ventures, that's everybody's favorite thing to pick apart. Mentor-protege relationships, another kind of a joint venture. There's just a lot of nuance surrounding things like that. And so if the government is asking for your feedback or asking what else they should take into consideration, that's a great time to speak up. And I think it's why we saw another revision to the MAPS draft, because they took feedback on that in December, and then they asked some specific questions, if you noticed, on the next revision that they sent out based on that feedback. So it is effective. It's an authorized channel. If they're asking for your feedback, give it to them. Okay, so things to do to prepare for these upcoming solicitations. You've heard us talk about this. It's the project tracking, right? And the good news is that Trident, once we get some firmish criteria, we don't do this on the very first draft, but generally once we have a sense of what's going to be evaluated and what's going to be important to track, we usually prepare a free download that will be available on our website that is specific to the opportunity. I know we've got one under construction right now for MAPS, because I think that's our next scorecard bid that's coming out. But these are just a really good way. Again, it's a free tool for you to get yourself organized, because people aren't missing things because they're negligent. Like, they're missing things because it's just really complex and there's a lot of details, and these are contracts in a lot of cases that are ongoing, so things can change. So you just got to be able to have a consolidated place to track and record your information, again, so that as your contract data gets updated or as the solicitation guidance changes, you've kind of got a standard understood baseline to start from and figure out what the impact is quickly, so that you can either make a project substitution or, hopefully you wouldn't be in this category, but if you no longer qualified or your project's no longer worked, it's better for you to hear that sooner rather than later, so that you have time to adjust, or you can stop investing resources on something that just does not make sense for your company right now.
We ran into that with Oasis Plus because of how long it dragged out. Our project tracker actually became really pivotal because we could see the period of performance flag out of relevancy or recency. And so having something like this kind of can help you catch the things that you may not otherwise have caught.
Yeah, and especially as it relates to like how project values are calculated, right? If a project ends over the course of a solicitation, what you're able to claim is the total contract value might change, sometimes dramatically. So yeah, just really great use cases specific to where this can come in handy, kind of at a glance. So great point, Kylie. One other thing to mention on this, and we're not going to go into a ton of detail, but we have seen a category called organizational risk assessment. And if you were in the trenches with us on any of those other bids, you already know what this means. But you may have to prove that you have worked with a teammate previously in order to basically get the credits that are available in an organizational risk assessment. Because what the government's trying to do in some cases is limit people going out and forming these customized teams just to pad their scorecard, right? Because you could go out and you could find this company that has this project that scores all the points, and this other company that has a top scoring project. And maybe you have a team of 5 companies and everybody's just got one project, but you guys have never worked together before. So you look really good on paper, but when it comes to the actual management and execution, the government doesn't necessarily have the assurance that you guys will function as effective teammates. And so sometimes they do build in this risk assessment to, basically it penalizes you if you haven't worked with these companies before. And again, a lot of nuance around this. Because if you're a joint venture that has not executed anything and you don't have a prime sub relationship, like that might be an instance where you're not eligible for credits. And so we just like to mention it early so that if your goal is to just get the highest score you can via whatever means possible, you might want to take a beat on that and just understand if there's going to be a portion of the scorecard intentionally designed to prohibit you from being able to do that. So hopefully that makes sense.
And then what not to do. One of them, of course, is to sign that paperwork too early. We've seen every amendment come out, every amendment under the sun. So if you're signing paperwork with those, with your companies or with your contracting offices too early, you run the risk of having to redo it or having to go back to them a couple of different times. And that can be detrimental. Just like Rebecca was just talking about, jumping headfirst into exclusive teaming arrangements may be to your disadvantage. If you set up a joint venture and all of a sudden that doesn't get you the points you need, or you start losing points because of that arrangement, you may not need to be in that team. So waiting for a couple permutations of the RFP to come out may be to your advantage before you start building those teams. Number 3 is assuming that your score won't change. It will. It will probably with every amendment. It will probably with each time you review your projects and each time you go through everything. So let yourself reevaluate that score, freshly grade yourself over and over again. Again, bring in that secondary evaluator to grade you so that you can be as harsh as you possibly can against your projects and your evaluation so that you know for sure whether this is a good bid for you. And then number 4, we think that you should not count yourself out until you have a second opinion. And I'll just say that, like, we at Trident are here to help you, to shepherd you often through these processes and to kind of guide you through proposalese and what the government means and industry talk. And so we always want you to come to somebody else for a second opinion so that when you're looking at these projects and you've calculated things out, you can come to somebody who can maybe understand the intentions of the government or how the government interprets those evaluation criteria just a little bit differently. I think, Rebecca, you mentioned that we had a client that we totally reevaluated their scorecard and they were a great candidate for one of these self-scoring proposals. And so having somebody who is more familiar with this type of proposal, maybe to your advantage, and looking at your projects and really giving you that gut check of, is this the right option for me or is this not the right option for me?
And just again, as a sort of FYI, one of the things that Trident does on these scorecard bids, in addition to putting out a free project tracker, we almost always have an eligibility check option. And it's for this reason. Like, we don't want you to pursue something if you're not qualified to do it, but we also don't want you to take yourself out of the fight, because sometimes it's just understanding how you could qualify or what you would need to do in order to qualify. And if you reach out to us early, we can help you figure out that solution before you just count yourself out of the game entirely. Because we've seen all kinds of things come up during these eligibility checks. We've had people come to us and say, I really just am not comfortable with the self-score. And I know that I shouldn't be doing this because when I did my self-score, I ended up with more points than what's possible. Or, hey, I really think that, my company's been in business for 10 years and we have these contracts, so I think I ought to qualify, but I'm just not getting there. We can just help you brainstorm and go through these things. And then with the eligibility checks, very often we allow you to credit the cost of that eligibility check towards your bid if you're qualified. So if you hire us and to do the eligibility check and we say, yeah, you can get there from here, we can roll that cost into a package. So it's just starting the investment sooner. And then if you don't qualify, it's a pretty low barrier to entry. And then you have the validation that you can take to your company leadership, right? Because sometimes your company leadership will get so excited about the next hot thing coming out and they don't take no for an answer. But with a scorecard bid, you can give them a factually informed, mathematical, we've crunched the numbers, here's what it would take to qualify kind of conversation. And so then we can help you with that messaging if you need just that validation that no, it's really not the right bid for you yet. So
one of my favorite parts of eligibility checks is for those clients that don't qualify, finding the things that may change in an amendment that would make them qualify. And so flagging those things on that first initial eligibility check helps us kind of track the changes in the amendments throughout the life cycle of the RFP in order to bring them back into it if we see something change or if we see something shift that's to their advantage. Cool. So where do you get all of our awesome free resources? This is our website. You can find all of our contract vehicles that we are offering packages or support for here. So typically we'll include a blog, a webinar if we have one specifically for that, or other free downloads. And we keep these updated. Somehow Rebecca has like this magic system where she's notified before everybody on the East Coast when projects change. So she is our canary, and she'll get us those updates pretty fast. We also have resources here which can guide you through some of those other free downloads and stuff like that. So if you could visit our website, that's here. You'll see on those contract things all of the kind of major contracts and major IDIQs that we're supporting. The next one coming out being MAPS, which we're all super excited about. So again, you can kind of click on these and it'll take you to the landing pages for each of those opportunities. Next, if you loved our talk today, you can join us in March, on March 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time or 11 a.m. Pacific Time for our discussion about MAPS, that marketplace for the acquisition of professional services contracts.
It's not an intuitive acronym.
No. It's not. It really is not. Or we'll talk about kind of that large scale scorecard based or self-scoring proposal and kind of what it looks like, how it shifted, and what you can expect for when that's actually released. Go ahead and visit our website and you can sign up to attend that webinar just like you did for this one as well. Anytime you see this bar here, that's when you see a free download. So that's that project tracker we're talking about. And you can download those all from our website and use them. Our MAPS ones will be up there soon. So you should look for that. Even if you don't ever hire us, those resources are available to you, and our blogs are available to you, which are kept super up to date about all of these proposals. So we hope that you use this as a resource either way. And we'll leave it open just for a little bit if anybody has any questions. Look at us, we're so cute.
Oh, yeah, one person typing. This is the Ask Us Anything session of the brief, at least for the next 3 minutes. So
yeah. My favorite Star Wars movie is Rogue One.
Okay. Marketing past performance. Potentially, yeah, I would say you should reach out to Kiley. And actually, I'm glad you asked that question because sometimes it does come up during the course of these proposal campaigns where we have people say, hey, can you help me find a teammate? And I would say sometimes is the answer, right? If we know somebody in our Rolodex that aligns well with your capabilities, we're absolutely happy to make that introduction. It can be a little bit tricky on these, especially on the small business side, because what we tend to see is that, like, just using Oasis Plus as an example, if somebody wants to go after the management and advisory domain, they in their small business, they might have exactly the same gaps as another small business looking for a teammate, and so they don't actually form a complementary portfolio. But we do kind of keep awareness, overall of the clients that we're supporting and our general client portfolio. So if we see an opportunity to make an introduction that would be beneficial to both parties, we can absolutely do that. And then if it's more of a matchmaking style, we do have business intelligence analysts who can help scanning the database, the contract award databases, to try and see who might be in your geographic region with certain socioeconomic designations that you could approach, and we could help you develop a call plan for that. So it's not one of our primary services as it relates to these campaigns, but it is an option.
I've dropped my email in the chat. So if you do have any questions or you want to reach out, please feel free.
Okay, 1 more minute left. Any other questions? I just want to say thank you very much for being with us today. Hopefully there's something beneficial in here that you can take away and apply to your next scorecard bid. And if you do need any help, please feel free to reach out. We're happy just to have a quick conversation about where you're at, where your head's at, what you're thinking about, what your concerns are, and then make a recommendation for next steps. Because sometimes it's just coming up with that plan of, all right, I think this is a good idea. What do I do? And we're happy to talk through that with you. Okay, awesome. Well, you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining.